Every day. I'm still learning.
By the power of the YouTube.
I can't tell if it's running or not. I pushed the button and the circle now has a little red square.
That means it's going.
All right.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch haba, welcome. Tonight is Motzai Shabbat, and we are going to be studying our advanced studies here at Congregation Mashiach Yisrael. My name is Scott Siskin, and tonight we're going to be studying Chapter 2 of the Alter Rebbe's magnum opus of Tanya. Last week, if you recall, we studied Chapter 1, and we asked a couple of very important questions. We asked, what is Chassidus? Why is Chassidus important? Why should a Messianic Jew or a Gentile study Chassidus? And we even hinted to the fact, maybe was Yeshua HaMashiach himself a Chassid? Right? Was he Chassidic? So all of these answers are really going to be brought to us as we continue the study. But in the beginning of Chapter 1, the Alter Rebbe brought forth several questions. Do we remember any of those, what those questions might have been?
Back it up.
Review. Review is good.
Several questions.
He asked a lot of questions. And like I said in Chapter 1, if you just read Chapter 1 by itself, you're left a little unsatisfied because he brings up too much and he doesn't close it. But it's going to take 10 chapters to close, 53 to close all of it. In that sense, give us one question that we were asking about. Primary question, we wanted to try to understand, what is a tzaddik? What is a righteous person?
Right.
What is a
saint?
saint?
What is a Beinoni? What is a...
Right, and
gotcha.
A wicked person, okay, that we can understand maybe. But how do we understand the concept of a Beinoni? This intermediate person, right? We
should well understand that. That's
we should well understand.
We all are.
Well, ideally, right? We should all strive to become a Beinoni.
Right. Which
is very strange because we have people like Rabbi saying, for example, I'm a Beinoni, and his student Abaya is saying, you leave no life for the rest of us, right? So we know that a Beinoni can't be half sins, half mitzvahs, because we know Rabbi, he studied Torah all day. He had no time to sin, right? As such, we need a more perfect, scientific, if you will, technological definition of this word Beinoni, intermediate, and what it means for us. And as Rebbe Betzalel here said, in fact, indeed, we can all strive and should strive to become a Beinoni, right? Mm-hmm. We may not all have the ability to become a tzaddik, as we'll soon learn, but we all have the ability to be a Beinoni. Mm. So, in attempting to answer this question,
and God forbid we should be.
God forbid, right? God forbid we should not be wicked.
God forbid it.
In order to begin answering this question, the Alter Rebbe begins speaking about our spiritual makeup, right? And he says that we have two souls within us, right? We have one animal soul or one vital soul, right? And we talked a lot about this vital soul at the end of Chapter 1. We said that there's also a godly soul. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. What do we talk about the animal soul, though, this vital soul? Where does it come from? What's it made of?
It comes from clay.
Dust.
Right, we know that of all of the creations in the universe, Klipat, right? We know that God made everything with one utterance, except for humanity, right? Humanity he made with 2 of the 10 utterances. He formed the body, and then he breathed the breath of life into our nostrils. So, we know that the animal soul was made from clay, from dust, from dirt. What's unique about clay? As Reb Yochanan here said, this is klipat noga, right? It's dust. It could be good, it could be bad. You could use it to make it a mud wall and keep heat in, and this is very good, or you could use it to throw it at somebody, I guess. That would be very not good. Right?
Natural elements. Actually, it's I think it's identified as all 4 of the natural elements.
Very true. Very true, right? This physical world,
fire,
right?
water, wind, and earth.
Right. And they all have expressions within our animal soul, right? The fire within us is arrogance, right? And the water within us is pleasure-seeking, and earth within us is depression, and so on and so forth. And that's the negative aspects, again, relating to the animal soul, because we're made from this physical stuff, right? Our bodies are made from molecules and atoms, and that represents the first utterance of creation. And like we said before, klipat noga, this husker shell, this stuff that's not holiness, but it's around holiness, this is what our bodies are made of. It could be elevated or denigrated, right? Is gold good or bad? Well, yes. It could be used to make a golden calf. There's nothing more unholy. Or it could be used to make a holy temple, right? There's nothing holier. So, we know that we have 2 souls. At the end of the last class, we talked about the animal soul. This is the animal soul, and we call it the vital soul because it vitalizes our body, right? Because the godly soul is too lofty. it's too spiritual, it's too close to God, it's too much like God, and as such, it doesn't really have a connection to the materialism, the physicality, right? So that's why the godly soul is within the animal soul, which is within the body. As such, the vital soul is always striving, I want more, right? More delight, more pleasure, more food, more sleep, more money, right? Because these are the things that keep a body going. So it's kind of a healthy thing, right? However, when we get too caught up in that, it can drag us way down, and that's the relationship of the animal soul to the Klipat Noga, again, the Klipat Noga being its source. This all comes from the idea of the animal soul, which we discussed last week. So, this week, chapter 2, we're going to begin. Chapter 2 begins discussing the godly soul, right? So we can get a little bit cheerier here. The godly soul from our map of Tanya over here, Baruch Hashem. The title of this chapter is The Godly Soul, and the little description here is every Jew, and we would put in parentheses here as we learned in the end of chapter 1, every Jew and every righteous Gentile, right? Because we know that the soul of a Jew and a righteous Gentile are very similar. What's the other category? There's a little quiz here. A real idolatrous member of the nations of the world, a heathen, right? How do we define them? These are people who want to do good for selfish reasons, right? The Jew and the righteous Gentile want to do good because it's good, right? This is the reason. And we look back no further than the Holocaust. We had Germans who sacrificed everything to get Jews out, and we had Germans who turned away. Well, not turned the other cheek, but they turned away, right? They hid their vision and they didn't do anything because it wouldn't benefit them, right? So that's what we mean when we say idolatrous nations or goyim, right?
You had said the motivation of the nations to do good was self-betterment, selfish motivation.
This is an identifying characteristic of the nations of the world, right? And remember, righteous Gentiles come out from every nation, right? Just because you're part of America and America is really concerned about itself does not mean you're one way or the other. God made you specific and put you in a spot for a reason. You can come out of Babylon whenever you want, right? So, every Jew and righteous Gentile possesses a godly soul, which is an actual piece or part of God himself. And this comes from the verse in Eov, the book of Job, chapter 31, verse 2, where he says that the godly soul is chelek Elokah, a part or a piece of God. Okay? And that's what it says in Job chapter 31, verse 2. So, without any further introduction, who would like to begin reading chapter 2?
I'll read.
Okay.
The second soul of a Jew is truly a part of God above, as it is written, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And thou didst breathe it, the soul, into me. And it is written in the Zohar, he who exhales from within him, that is to say, from his inwardness and his innermost. For it is something of his internal and innermost vitality that man emits through exhaling with force.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. We discussed that the animal soul was made with the first of two divine utterances, right? God formed man from the earth, right? From the dust, from the clay. This second expression, this second utterance that God used to create mankind is called he blew the breath of life into the nostrils, or he breathed into his nostrils a soul of life. So this is all, of course, allegory and imagery, right? We don't know exactly what happened on that day. Why does the Bible choose to use the terminology of blowing? Right? Why blowing?
Because he's imparting, isn't he?
He's imparting, is exactly right. That's Torah point of view. So,
and Ruach encompasses the idea of spirit,
right?
Of wind.
Wind, breath, sure.
Right.
Even scent.
And
as we notice the nostrils here, we'll get to that.
Remember that after the resurrection, Yeshua walked through the wall in John, and it says he breathed on them.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know if that's a good translation, but it could say
Well,
maybe he blew on them. I've seen
It
people
said, "Receive
blow
the Holy Spirit."
on people in praying or whatever, but
Right.
it says he breathed on them. He said, "Receive the Holy Spirit."
What's that about? Exactly right. He's
think it's
implanting
chapter
this
21.
new soul, right? What happened when the God...
Interesting.
So let's just examine that for a second.
Interesting.
What happened when God breathed the breath of life into our nostrils? We got implanted with this second soul, right? This godly soul, as we'll soon describe.
And we got life and breathed.
And we became animated, right? Because the soul, the animal soul with the body by itself, this is more like an animal,
not a life force,
not a human, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we see Yeshua HaMashiach and he's in the Gospels and he's breathing on the people, why did he say that he did that?
He told them receive the Holy Spirit.
Receive the Ruach HaKodesh, right? So they got another spirit. This is how spirit is imparted, through this blowing, through this breath, right? They got a third one. This is the Ruach HaKodesh, right? This is God's spirit. And this allows them access to all kinds of really cool stuff, which we'll talk about later. That said, again, why they emphasis on blowing. Remember, the world was created, says Pirkei Avot, in 10 divine utterances, right? God said, Yehi Or, let there be light. Yehi Rakia, let there be a firmament. Let the waters gather together. Let the earth sprout forth herbage, right? He spoke all of these things into being. We're going to talk about the incredible power of speech and words, specifically relating to God and also our own. That said, why does the tense change, or why does the language change? It's no longer he spoke. Why didn't God place a breath of life into our nostrils? Why didn't he speak it into our nostrils? Why this imagery of blowing? And I think you hit the nail right on the head. It's because he imparted a piece of ourself. Look at the text. Of himself. Right. And it's written in the Zohar, he who blows from within him, that is to say, from his inwardness, from his innermost. It's something of his internal and innermost vitality that man emits through exhaling force. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this for a little bit now, right? I can speak for like a long time without taking a breath, right? Mm-hmm. How long can you exhale without taking a breath? Not long, right? Mm-hmm. Because it exhausts you, because it's part of your essence, right? God's using this imagery to say, when I gave you this second soul, this godly soul, and I breathed the breath of life into your nostrils, a piece of me went with it, right? That's what we need to understand from this language, from this verbiage. And of course, just a few days ago, or last night, we talked about the incense altar in the Holy Temple, right? And the incense altar having to do with smell, and this is really close to our soul. Why is it close to our soul? Look back in chapter 1, right? God specifically is going through the nostrils. And if you look at the nostrils, why didn't God place the soul through our hand, right? Because he didn't want the hand to exalt itself. You can do a lot of sinning with the hand. Why didn't God put it through our eyes, right? Because you can look with your eyes and you could see something that could make you sin. Why not our mouth? Because we say lashon hara, we say evil speech sometimes, right? The nostril is the scent, is one of the purest senses that we have, right? And it's most closely tied to memory, which again I think is completely related, right?
It's very interesting that it records, like you said, when he said, let there be light and so forth.
Sure.
This is the one case where it doesn't record him saying anything. He breathed into man. There's no word spoken, so all the others were something that came out of him. I remember last year when we came up, we started like 2/3 of the way through this. We were talking about his essence and so forth.
Right.
But that's it. I never thought that's interesting that he breathed.
Right. Like
it says he breathed. It doesn't say he said.
No, right. It's not past.
He breathed.
He didn't command.
It doesn't say he said, let there be a man. He formed man.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting.
Well, too, his breath is personal.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely true.
Yeah,
It's intimate. It's personal.
What's one of the defining characteristics of kissing, right? The idea of kissing is exchanging breath, right? You're right there. Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about the concept of the spiritual imagery of kissing much later, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. This may be a very obvious aspect, but God didn't make any other part of his creation in his own image.
That's
true.
So true, and very important for us to remember.
And there's a lot
all
of
humans
creation.
are created in God's image, and I say all humans, like all of us, right? Jews, righteous Gentiles, and even pagan idolaters, right? Made in God's image.
Man is,
So
allegorically speaking, have the souls of Jews risen in the divine thought, as it is written, my firstborn son is Israel, and ye are children unto the Lord your God. That is to say, just as a child is derived from his father's brain, so, to use an anthropomorphism. The soul of each Israelite is derived from God's blessed be he thought and wisdom, for he is wise, but not through a knowable wisdom, because he and his wisdom are one.
Okay, we could pause right there.
As Maimonides says.
Well, we'll get into what the Rambam has to say. So, we're talking of this concept, and I'm glad that you said it. All mankind is created in the image of God, okay? But not all mankind are the children of God, right? Excuse me. This is something that was reserved for Israel. This is something that was reserved for those who were grafted into the vine. This is something reserved to those who are called God's special, God's chosen, God's firstborn, right? How do you say chosen people in Hebrew? Chosen in Hebrew is Bachar, right? Asher Bachar Bana Mikolam, or he chose us. And Bachar means firstborn. It's the same thing, right? We say Bikurim. Bikurim, that's first fruits, right? Same word, same root.
Tell Pharaoh, Israel is my firstborn.
My firstborn, my son, Bani, right? So, how does this concept work? And again, we're going to be using imagery here, anthropomorphism, right? We're going to be imagery being the key word here. The concept is related to the concept of seed, okay? And I think in our world we have a very in our world we have a very good all right, that's good. 1,000 apologies.
Well,
So
it could have been an easier way.
you'd think. So in our world we have a pretty good analogy for this. The concept is DNA, right? DNA, the concept of DNA. In the sperm of the father is contained all of the information necessary for all of the entire baby, right? The entire child.
What's a cord?
Cord.
All right. So, in the concept of procreation, making a child, right? We have this idea of seed, okay? So the seed contains the father's DNA, combines with the mother's DNA in the egg, and that is all the information you need to make an entire body, right? So all of the highest wisdom of the father is contained within that seed, right? All of the lowest essence of that father is contained in that seed, right? The complex pathways and neurons, right, that make up the father's intellect and wisdom are in that DNA. The not so complex toenail of the father is contained within that DNA, right? And you have a baby, and the baby comes out, and the baby has a brain, and it's developing neurons, and the baby has toenails, right? And this all comes from the same one source, right? That's the relationship between us and God, being God's chosen, right? God's firstborn, God's Bachar, which we're going to call here Israel, grafted into the vine of Israel. And that means Jews and righteous Gentiles who chose to combine themselves with God, right? Unite themselves with God and his people. In this sense, God's DNA is the fundamental substance that makes up our godly soul. And again, this goes back to the concept and imagery of breathing, right? It comes from his innermost, right? So we have lots of different kinds of people, as we're soon going to read here, lots of different kinds of people, but they all come from God's essence and God's soul, if you will, right? And this is the imagery that we're using, and it's evoked here in chapter 1 of Genesis. Okay? So I think we should skip the note here.
Okay.
But you can start with "and as Maimonides says."
And as Maimonides says, so you don't want me to read this little part? Okay.
Not the note.
He is the
That
knowledge.
he is the knowledge and knower. And
So
this,
let's complete that. The Alter Rebbe here, very often he's going to chop off quotations, assuming that you know the rest of it. So in case you don't know the rest of the quote, I'm going to help you out there and fill you in. The Rambam, Maimonides, the great halakhic codifier, says that God is the knower, the knowledge, and the known. Okay? So God is the one who knows. He is the faculty through which things are known, and he is the subject matter. Okay? God is everything. And this is what we say every day when we close our eyes, when we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, right? God is one, means that he is everything, right? Not that there's one God, not two, and not 10. We understand that already. A child understands that. So, this concept of he is the knower, the knowledge, and the known, God is everything, is going to help us understand how God is so much a part of our godly soul. All right? This note that we skipped here is basically saying that all the Kabbalists out there, all of these righteous people who study the hidden wisdom and all this stuff, absolutely agree with the Rambam here. And they say that he is the knower, knowledge, and the known. This is very true. There are some scholars out there who say, oh, you can't limit God by saying he is this, right? And that's a very holy concept. At the same point, the Rambam, as we're going to read here in just a second, says this is a very lofty concept, right? That he is everything is what the Rambam is trying to describe here.
That's good.
So And like I said, it's going to say here in just a second, if you're having trouble figuring this out, don't even bother, right? The Rambam says this is beyond a human's ability to fully comprehend. You can go ahead.
And this is not within the power of any man to comprehend clearly, as it is written, canst thou by searching find God? And it is also written, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. And though there are myriads of different gradations of souls, neshama, rank upon rank, ad infinitum, yes, that one, as with the superiority of the souls of the patriarchs and of Moses our teacher above the souls of our own generations, who live in the period preceding the coming of Messiah.
That's us.
Which are as the very soles of the feet compared with the brain
S-O-L-E,
and head.
right?
So in every generation there are the leaders of the Jews whose souls are in the category of head and brain in comparison with those of the masses and the ignorant.
So let's pause for a second and try to decide or figure out what the Alter Rebbe is trying to say. We just read a paragraph. Do we understand that? Do we comprehend that?
Yeah, there are people that are the teachers of that generation, and they're considered the head or the brain, and the rest are everybody's a different part.
So what the
some are the soles of the feet, some are the
right. We see that there are different people,
right?
There Moses
just like
is
the body
out there,
of Messiah. It's all different.
And Abraham's out there, just like the body of Mashiach, right?
Right.
And there are toenail souls as well. So the Alter Rebbe is raising a question here. He said, okay, we just said God is one, and there's nothing outside of God, and every godly soul is literally a piece and a part of God himself, and God doesn't change, right? My thoughts are not your thoughts. So how could we say that there's a Moses and an Aaron and me? Not that I'm saying like I'm much lower than them, like how could there be normal people like me and high people like the patriarchs and the matriarchs when God is one and the godly soul is the same in all of us, right? How can we say that? So this is what the concept that we're describing.
Well, the peace of God is in us, but we are not God.
But we are not God, right? We are an expression of godliness, right? So if you have this DNA, and again, DNA is such a beautiful paradigm to help us understand this. You have this really long chain of DNA, and this section deals specifically with toenail stuff, right? And you need that functionality because your toes need to be protected, whatever. And you have other functionality over here that makes neurons in the brain, or you have other stuff that makes hearts or kidneys, and it's all important and necessary, right? So just as God is one, we're saying God is one like the DNA, right? The DNA can be expressed as an Abraham, who's like a neuron in the brain, or it can be expressed as a toenail, which is maybe some of the less righteous of Israel, right? Some of the less righteous who are grafted into the tree.
All right, so where
does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Let's see. You left off here likewise.
Likewise, are there distinctions between nefashot,
nefashot,
souls. And nefashot?
Soul
upon soul.
Between
For every soul consists of nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Nevertheless, the root of every nefesh, ruach, and neshama, from the height of all ranks to the lowest, that is embodied within the illiterate, and the most worthless, all derive, as it were, from the supreme mind, which is Chokmah, Elila, Elah.
Chokmah Ila'ah.
Right.
The supernal or high wisdom. So let's digest this for a second. We said a couple of things here. One.
I don't know that we can.
I think we could. It's going to be okay.
Very true.
No, this is above us.
I mean, it's easy. It's easy. All right. So, one, we're saying there's difference between souls and souls, right? My soul is not exactly the same as your soul, even though we said that they're all from God, right? But I'm an expression of God, and you're a different expression of God, okay? Mm-hmm. That we covered. Now we're saying each and every one of our godly souls is made up of 3 parts. 3 parts. What are the 3 parts? A nefesh, a ruach, and a neshama. So let's just talk about them for a quick second. What is the difference between the 3? I think I like the parable here that like snowmen, or I'm sorry, Eskimo have like lots of different names for snow. Right? They have like 50 different words for snow because there's lots of really different types of snow if you think about it. Whereas, Jews, we study a lot of Torah, right? So we have...
Actually, to an Eskimo, everything's snow.
Well, I guess that's probably true. Either way, for Jews, we have 5 different words you'll find in the Bible for the word soul, right? In English, it's translated soul or spirit, and you kind of feel like they're the exact same thing. You don't really know what you're talking about. In Judaism, we understand 5 different levels of the soul. 3 of these levels are contained within our body, and that's what we're discussing now. Later, we'll discuss the other 2. They are not contained within our body. They're rooted in heaven. Okay? So the first 3 levels, and we're going to start from the bottom here. The first three levels are called by the acrostic Naran. Naran means nefesh, ruach, and neshama. So the lowest is called nefesh. Nefesh translates into soul. Anytime the Hebrew word in the Bible, soul, or nefesh comes up, it'll be translated in your English Bible most likely as the word soul. Okay? Sometimes it may be may be translated as life. Sometimes. A nefesh is the part of your soul that energizes your body. This is the part of your soul that energizes the action associated with man. The fact that I could pick up this cup and take a drink and move it over here, that's all controlled by my nefesh, right? This level of my soul, the lowest level of my soul called nefesh. We understand?
And you said life as well.
Sometimes it's called life. More often almost always it's called soul.
Okay.
The second level, the ruach, is translated almost always as spirit. The spirit, the ruach, is the part of our soul which energizes our emotions, right? We don't have to have a conversation with my arm and say, please move and pick up this glass, right? It happens automatically because it's connected to my nefesh, right? This lowest part of my soul. My emotions happen automatically, and I don't need to, they're automatically connected to my soul, and they're connected to the ruach part of my soul, right? The part of my soul that emotes. So that's the ruach.
Relate to the midot.
And they're very closely related to the midot, which we're going to hopefully cover if we can get to chapter 3 tonight. And then there's the highest level of our...
Wait.
Okay.
I'm sorry. The part of my soul that emotes.
Emotes. Makes emotions.
Gotcha. Makes motion?
Makes
or
emotion. Right. The part of my soul that loves
You said
and feels.
energizes motion before.
Emotion.
Yeah, it depends on you whether you want to use a verb, a noun, or an adjective. It's emotive.
It's emotive. Right. The part of our soul that loves and fears, etc., etc.
Gotcha.
Okay. Take a sip here.
Okay. And the next one was?
So the highest part of the soul, which is contained within our body, is called the neshama, right? Neshama. And it's very, very, in Judaism, you're going to hear this word a lot when you're talking about souls. When the Bible uses this word neshama, it's translated almost always as soul. You don't really find it as anything else because it's a higher level of soul and we don't really know what to do with it. Or a lot of translators really don't know what to do with it. So the neshama is the part of your soul that energizes your intellect, right? The ability for you to think. Okay?
Wait, hold on.
Neshama is the part of your soul that energizes your intellect and allows you to think. It's the highest part of the soul which is contained within you.
And that's when the prayer says that exact thing. The soul that you have placed within me is considered the neshama.
And that's a good time to bring that up. So we have in our Siddur, right, every morning we say the prayers. The morning prayers, you wake up and you say, Modeh Ani, right? Thank you, God, that I came back. And that's really a truncated prayer, right? You say, Modeh Ani lefanecha melech hai v'kayim, shechazarta bi nishmati bechemla, Rabbi munatecha. I offer thanks to you, living and eternal King, for you have mercifully restored my soul within me. Your faithfulness is great, right? We say this as soon as we wake up, every morning. But this is a truncated blessing. We don't use God's name, right? Because we haven't washed our hands, etc., etc. This blessing is completed and made full at the bottom of the page here on page 5, where we say this famous prayer, Elokai, my God, Neshama shenatatabi, the soul which you have given within me, Tohorahi, it's pure, right? She is pure. All souls are feminine. So, and I'll just read the full prayer here. My God, the soul which you have given within me is pure. You have created it. Right. Ata barata, you created it. Ata yitzarta, you formed it. Ata nafachtabi, you have breathed it within me. Ve'ata mashama bekirbi, and you guard it or protect it within me. Right. You keep it within me. You preserve it within me.
Preserve. Right?
So.
It's like the Shekiah. You've given us life and sustain us.
Right. So, without getting into too much detail here, and I don't think we need to get into. Well, we're gonna get there eventually soon, anyways.
Which that was just a kind of a little flash because the Shekiah is reserved for special life events or festivals.
Right, exactly.
And this is equivalent to
because I'm alive today, and God didn't have to let me wake up today, right? But I did. So, we're going to go back into this prayer in a couple of paragraphs here, but in the meantime, I just want you to note the first couple of words. My God, the soul which you have given within me is pure. Why do we say this as soon as we wake up? the soul which you put within me is pure. Who's speaking? Who's speaking?
The soul is
There's no Shama.
Right, it's not the godly soul.
What'd you say, Lisa?
What'd you say, Lisa?
Right. Well, you said, why do we say that prayer? Is because
the nefesh is
it goes up to Shemayim every night.
Exactly.
That's
and
it's true.
And then it comes back.
Right.
You know, it's like it goes up and gets energized. It's
Mm-hmm.
like when we go to sleep, it's, you know, we're going to get energized.
Very true.
And then it comes back down.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to hit that concept in the next column here. But before that, let's just focus on the concept, who's speaking, right? When you're thinking in your head right now, are you thinking as your godly soul? Are you your godly soul? The you that you think is me, right? Like, I am...
Flesh. I'm the low one.
Our conscious thoughts.
That is the animal soul.
our conscious thoughts are the animal soul, right? The godly soul, how does God described when he's speaking to Elijah? It's a still small voice, right? It's something quiet, hidden within us, right? The godly soul has a voice just like that. It's quiet within. You know who shouts, who's loud, who's a nudnik, who's banging on stuff and trying to get you to do stuff? That's the animal soul, right? Which is more closely connected to the Satan. As such, when we say this prayer in the morning, we say, God, this thing that you put in me, this soul which you breathed into me, this is a pure thing. I am not such a pure thing, right? The Kabbalah describes humanity, the body, as a serpent skin, right? There's a princess, which is your godly soul, and it's contained within this serpent skin, right? She's very uncomfortable.
The body is referred to as a serpent skin.
Niskid dechivya, a serpent skin, right? Not fun. So we're going to revisit this prayer in a second. We can go ahead and continue at this point, I guess. What we wanted to say is that the soul is comprised of, and this is true for both souls, yeah? The animal soul and the godly. Right now, we're talking about the godly soul, but it's true for both. They have a nefesh, a ruach, and a neshama. A part that energizes the action, a part that energizes the emotion, a part that energizes the intellect. Okay? So, just to really cover this thought, when we talk about there are different people, different souls, people are different, right? It's because their soul is broken up into these three different parts, which can come from our various different expressions of God's DNA, as we said, right? So you could have a nefesh that's very lofty, and you only do holy things, but you could have a ruach, right, that is maybe not so lofty, and therefore you have negative emotions, etc., etc. So, go ahead.
Okay, supernal wisdom. The manner of this descent is analogous to that of a son who is derived from his father's brain, and that even the nails of his feet come into existence from the very same drop of semen.
And this is the DNA that we spoke about before, right? The concept that it could make the highest intellect or it could make a toenail. It's the same DNA.
By being in the mother's womb for 9 months, descending degree by degree, changing continually, until even the nails are formed from it. Yet after all this process, it is still bound and unified with a wonderful and essential unity with its original essence and being, which is the drop as it came from the Father's brain. And even now, in the Son, the nails receive their nourishment and life from the brain that is in the head.
When we talk about the brain, what is the brain's job for the body, right? The toenail's job is to protect the toe. What's the brain's job?
To protect the body?
It's the control center. Everything happens in the brain, right? My toe is getting blood from my blood vessels right now, and those blood vessels are controlled by my brain, right? My brain could send a nerve signal to my blood vessels to shut that part down really quick or open it up, right? And they can get more life or less life, and it's all controlled by the brain. That's an important thing for us to remember.
As it
Can
is.
I
Sure.
ask a quick question? Is the highest level of the soul, the Shama, the godly soul, or all three of these are parts of the godly soul?
All three of these are parts of the godly soul. And again, all three of the animal soul is broken up into the same three parts.
Same three.
Same three. This is the structure of a soul we're talking about.
Different.
They look a lot different,
Okay.
right? They're made from different substances, but they have a similar form. And we're going to talk about how all of these are reflected in the animal soul at some point in the near future. But like I said, right now we're talking about the godly soul.
Okay. As is written in the Gemara,
In the Talmud.
Nida Ibid, from the while of the father's drop of semen are formed the veins, the bones, and the nails, And in Etz Chaim, She'ar ha-Chazmal, it is likewise stated, in connection with the esoteric principle of Adam's garments in the Garden of Eden, that they, the garments, were the nails derived from the cognitive faculty of the brain. So, as it were, it is actually true of the root of every nefesh, ruach, and neshama, in the community of Israel on high,
in the olive tree,
in descending degree by degree through the descent of the worlds of Atzilut, emanation, Beriah, creation, Yetzirah, formation, and Asiya, action, from his blessed wisdom, as it is written, Thou hast made them all with wisdom. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the ignorant and unworthy come into being.
So let's just pause there and discuss. So,
really? The next word is nevertheless.
Nevertheless.
How are we going to know what we're comparing to if we don't understand the first concept?
Okay.
So, we talked about this concept, and I don't have any paper here with which to write, and I don't...
Here, right here.
That's okay. Oh,
here,
that's
here.
my special notebook.
I got a million pieces of paper.
That's okay. We're just going to talk about it in figurative really quick.
You know you like your little diagrams and drawings.
This notebook is made
Here, diagram.
I see what you're saying.
I'll have a diagram.
That's okay. Do you have the diagram of the four worlds, though? Can you whip that out real quick?
Yes.
I think mine is upstairs, actually.
Uh-oh. Where's mine?
That's fine. We'll go ahead and describe it while we're fishing through
Mine is
paperwork.
upstairs. I don't have mine.
All right.
Do you have yours?
I have one.
It seems like Yochanan
John's
is ready
got
for
his.
action here. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right, so this one's a little bit busy, but, for our viewers online, you can go ahead and take a look at this.
Calmer than mine.
A little calmer than
A
yours.
little calmer.
So we understand that the world...
Mine's
There you go.
protected.
Go ahead and show it to the camera here for us, and I'll speak. So, the concept here, we have 4 general worlds. You thought it was a universe. Haha, it's a multiverse,
Should
right?
I zoom in?
Oh, that's okay. That's probably good. I'm sure they'll get the idea. Anybody who would like this material, we'd be happy to take a picture of it and email it to you. Until then, we know that the world is chopped up, as we know it, creation is chopped up into 4 basic worlds, 4 basic universes, right? We live in the lowest world that's called Asiya. This is the world of action, right? Mm-hmm. This is the only world, by the way, where you can make actions happen, all right? The rest are spiritual worlds, and you can't act in the spiritual world. The next world that's above us is called Yetzirah, the world of formation. This is primarily where all the angels live, right? Mm-hmm. Michael and Gabriel and all of these guys, right? They're up there, along with the lower Garden of Eden is up here. The lower Garden of Eden, this is where many of the souls of humanity go. When you die, they go to this Garden of Eden on high, the lower Garden of Eden, and they experience pleasure, right? In this world, it's all about action. It's all about God's kingship. In that world of Yetzirah, it's all about the emotions, right? Love of God, awe and respect of God, feeling God's compassion, feeling God's salvation, right? That's what that world's all about. The world on top of that is called the world of Beriah, the world of creation, right? This is where creation really kind of first begins, as we'll discuss much later. The world of Beriah is dominated by the attribute of Bina, understanding, as we're going to find out. This is where the souls of the great Torah scholars go when they die. Angels exist here, but they're typically not permitted in the same chamber as humans. Human souls. In this place, this is all about understanding God, right? Understanding his attributes and how it inspires our emotions, right? This is called the higher Garden of Eden. Above that is the world of Atzilut. This is called the world of emanation, right? This is the world that's totally one with God. Anything above this line, anything that's in the world of Atzilut is God, right? We can call it God and not get in trouble for that. Remember, God is very big, all right? And God is very infinite, and God encompasses all worlds, and God fills all worlds, and there's only one God, right? We need to understand that process of creation is incredibly complex. So let's not jump to any conclusions here. All we need to know for now is that our souls, right, come from that high level of Atzilut, where everything is one with God, right? Specifically in the realm of Chokhmah of that world, the realm of wisdom, right? We all come from God's wisdom. And again, this is the idea, again, of DNA, okay? So it's the same thing we've been saying the whole time. We just put a map to it.
The line said the Chokhmah Ilah.
Chokhmah Ilah, the highest wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about Sphirot later, but in the meantime, we can just know that the highest wisdom, that's where our souls derive from. So if we go back to our prayer in the morning here, Elokai, Neshama Shenatatabi, My God, the soul which you have given within me is pure. You have created it, right? Berea, world of creation. You have formed it. Yetzira, world of formation. We say Ata Barata, like Berea, created. Ata Yetzarta, like Yetzira, you formed it. Ata Nafachtabi, and you have breathed it into me. Now we're talking about the concept of breath, atmosphere, physicality, which is our world of Atzia. So you can see how the soul trickles down. This goes back to Elisheva's point earlier. Every night when we go to sleep, our soul ascends and has some time with God in the Garden of Eden. And then every morning it comes back down through this histalshalut, this chain-like descent through the world. Right. So we go up and we come down every night. More about that later. So, all that said, nevertheless.
Okay.
Okay.
Nevertheless, they remain bound and united with a wonderful and essential unity with their original essence and entity, namely the extension of Chokmah Ilah.
What is Chokmah Ilah?
Supernal wisdom.
Supernal wisdom, the highest wisdom, right? Mm-hmm. The wisdom that's in the world of Atzilut, this world that's united in a perfect unity with God. I'll give that back to you if you want it. Okay.
Inasmuch as the nurture and life of the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama of the ignorant are drawn from the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama of the saints and sages, the heads of Israel in their generation.
So we're saying all souls are derived from this exact same spot, which is why there's each godly soul is actually a piece and parcel of God. The verse in Job, chapter 31, verse 2, says the soul is a chelek elokah, right? A piece of God, a part of God, right? The Alter Rebbe in his famous chapter of Tanya here says, chelek elokah mamish, right? This is a piece of God literally, right? And he's going on again here to back this statement up. So even though there's lots of different kinds of people, they all come from the same source, the same DNA, but lots of different expressions. Concept's pretty easy, right?
Piece of cake. This explains the comment of our sages on the verse, and to cleave unto him. He who cleaves unto a scholar of the Torah is deemed by the Torah as if he had become attached to the very Shekinah, divine presence.
So when we say, the Bible says, our sages say, we should cleave to God, right? In Deuteronomy chapter 30, we should cleave to God. What does that mean? We know that God is everything. What do we should go? Hug a tree, right? If you're hugging a tree, you're cleaving to a tree. How do you cleave to God?
Study.
How do you study? You go to the great Torah scholars, right?
Mm-hmm.
By attaching yourself to them, you're attaching yourself to God. This is such an important Messianic concept. Is this not exactly what Yeshua HaMashiach said when they said, "Oh, show us the Father and it's going to be enough for us," right? He said, if you saw me, you saw the Father. Why? Because he was this head soul, right? He wasn't a toenail soul. Yeshua HaMashiach, he is the pièce de résistance. You know, he's this highest level. So if we're connecting to this highest level of the body of Messiah, then we're connecting to God, right? Because the body of Messiah, this body of souls, right, this body of Israel, is chelek elokah mamish, a piece of God literally, right? Mm-hmm. That's why Yeshua could say what he said. He's a very good Kabbalist, Yeshua.
Very good Kabbalist. And the fact that he describes the body in the first place is showing that he's teaching them what he's talking about right here. Mm-hmm. But you're supposed to go back and learn.
Right. Absolutely true.
You know what I'm saying?
So when Yeshua's saying...
It ain't about hugging trees.
Ain't about
hugging trees, right? What do we got to hug?
Nice,
we hug the Torah scholars, right? We cleave to them. Why? Because they're going to teach us a couple of words. You think that's really knowing God? Because you have some kind of intellectual thing?
No, through attachment to the scholars, the Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama of the ignorant are bound up and united with their original essence and their root in the Chokmah Ilah,
right?
The supernal wisdom.
So remember, we talked about this wisdom, right? This brain is the part that controls every part of the body, right? Even the blood that goes to the toenail is controlled by the brain, right? So if this is God's functionality, this is God's creation, by connecting to that highest level, you're connecting to him, or at least as close as you can get in this world, right? That's true for the ignorant and the scholarly alike, right? It's all by cleaving to these Torah scholars. Not, again, because they're going to teach you some certain words, but because they're going to show you what it means to love God. They're going to show you what it means to fear God. And that goes beyond teaching, right? That's not memorizing verses at that point. That's something much deeper.
It kind of a real shot. Mm-hmm. They're more connected to God, so if we connect to them, we're tapping into the connection.
Absolutely true. I think it was our Tuesday study when we were talking about this concept of Mashiach being an enabling intermediary, right? An intermediary between us and God that can help us to reach up higher than we could have reached by ourselves, right? Because he's kind of like pulling us up and throwing us up, right? So this is kind of the same shtick.
Okay, where did I leave him? He and his wisdom being one, and he is knowledge.
No, I think you're a little bit higher. For though an attachment. For through.
Oh,
rather.
for through attachment to the skull.
I
Oh,
just
he
read
read it.
that.
Yeah.
You can go to he is the knowledge.
All right, I stand corrected.
He is the knowledge, and as for them who willfully sin and rebel against the sages, the nurture of their nefesh, ruach, and neshama comes from behind the back, as it were, of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama of the scholars.
So let's just
Interesting.
talk about
What does
that a
that
little
mean?
bit. Does a great Torah scholar, who we're saying is the life of the world here, right? Picture this body of souls in every generation. In every generation there's going to be head souls. In every generation there's going to be toenail souls, right? And we're saying by connecting to the head souls, by connecting to the Torah scholars, by connecting to the Mashiach energy in that generation, you're able to get closer to God. You're able to cleave to God and fulfill what the Bible tells us to in Deuteronomy 30. This sounds great. However, we know that there are people, this is a sobering thought, we know there are people who scorn the scholars, right? They say, oh, tefillin's a joke. They say, oh, this guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
And who are those rabbis? What do they know?
And then they say things like this, right?
We don't want to do Lashon Hara.
We don't want to do Lashon Hara, right? So, when we have these kinds of individuals who are, let's say, scorning the Spirit here, right? Does God stop energizing them? That's not how it works. God causes the rain to fall on the righteous and the wicked alike. But to the righteous, it's like giving a gift to a child. Hey, Mom, I need $5,000 for this college course I want to take. It should be great. Oh, my son, I'm so happy. You're so scholarly. I'd be happy to give it to you. I give it to you with pleasure and blessing, and it's a beautiful, wonderful experience, right? What about the son who says, oh, I need $5,000 for this lawyer for this court case because I'm involved in drugs and it's a horrible situation, right? Do you give that money to the kid? Of course you do. But it's different, right? That is like...
doesn't bring you joy.
Doesn't bring you nachas, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is a very important
thing.
thing.
In that case, you say, who do I make the check
Right. So we need to understand something very important here. We started a little earlier ago when we talked to every human is in the image of God, made in the image of God. Not every human is God's child, God's bacher, God's firstborn, God's chosen.
Right.
Anybody could be if they would like to graft themselves into the olive tree. In this concept, the scholar who wants $5,000 for his college course and the drug dealer's son who wants $5,000 for his court case, which one of those two sons is less of a child?
Neither child.
Yeah, I didn't say which one gives you less pleasure.
Right.
They're both equally
They are
children.
your sons,
right?
the sons of your
They
heart.
are both expressions of you.
Right.
Somehow.
Right.
Right? That's what we're talking about here.
As for what is written in the Zohar and the Zohar Chadash, to the effect that the essential factor is to conduct oneself in a holy manner during sexual union, which is not the case with the children of the ignorant, and so on, it is...
So let's just pause there for a second. There's a statement in the Zohar that, okay, what if I can... Is there a way that I might be able to manipulate the situation in such a way as to get a son who's got a really lofty soul, and he's not going to cause me all kinds of tsuris, right? Could you do that? The Zohar says, it's possible. It's possible, right? If you engage in intimacy with your spouse, right? Or, yeah, let's go with the holy way here first. You engage in intimacy with your spouse in a holy way, with God in mind, as all of the writings say that, sex is one of the most holiest experiences we could have. It's one of the loftiest experiences we could have, which is why it's so easy to denigrate, which is why it's so easy to turn dirty, right? If you can do it in a holy way, it's Erev Shabbat, etc., then you, says the Zohar, you're going to draw down. This is going to be a better son, possibly,
going to be
right?
a good son.
A more holier...
It's not going to be chaos.
It's not going to be as much chaos, right? If you do it the other way, not so much. This is the statement of the Zohar. So the Alter Rebbe now is coming to say, how could we possibly say that? That doesn't seem to make sense when we talk about all souls are from God, and God makes all of these things the way that he's going to make them. Exactly what do we mean by that? So you can keep reading.
Okay. which is not the case with the children of the ignorant, and so on. It is to be understood as the meaning that since there is not a nefesh, ruach, and neshama, which has not a garment of the nefesh of its...
Go ahead.
Didn't I say that? Garment
no,
of the nefesh?
I'm just emphasizing it.
Of its father's and mother's essence, and all the commandments that it fulfills are all influenced by that garment. And even the benevolence that flows to one from heaven is all given through that garment. Hence, through self-sanctification, one will cause to descend for the neshama of one's child a holy garment.
A holy garment.
And however, a great soul it may be, but it still needs the Father's sanctification.
So let's just pause there for a second. The Alter Rebbe is describing, if you are doing this thing, what we're calling holy intimacy, right, and it's pure and it's godly and all this other stuff, then it's not the soul, it's not the godly soul that you're going to be drawing down is going to be different. It's the garment for the godly soul. And the way that I understand this, and this may be wrong, so I apologize if I understand this incorrectly, but the way that I understand it, what's the garment of the godly soul? It's the animal soul, right? So what part did the mother and father contribute to the child? Because God's the third partner. Soul. They make the body, right? They make the body, and then God fills the body with the soul. He breathes, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, and again, that might not be the perfect way to understand it, but I think it kind of helps me a little bit. The mother and father can affect the environment, they can affect the circumstances, but what God puts in a person is God's choice. As such, you could have righteous parents who have wicked children, and vice versa, right? You could have the most horrible of situations growing up, and you could have a saint come out of that, right? That's God's choice. That's the godly soul. That's an expression of God's DNA. That said, we as parents, we can manipulate that environment to make it as easy as possible for the kid. Right?
As prime as possible, if God's gonna,
Right.
But as for the soul itself, it sometimes happens that the soul of an infinitely lofty person comes to the son of a despised and lowly man. All this has been explained by Rabbi Isaac Luria of blessed memory in the Lakutei Torah on Parshat Vayera and in the Ta'ami HaMitzvot on Parshat Bereshit.
Amen. So
explain that because I want to hear that part.
That's the completion of chapter 2. What part did you need explanation?
I want to hear that about the infinitely lofty person comes to the son of a despised and lowly man. All this has been explained. Could you explain?
Well, it's been explained in those sources that we...
right, so do you know what they reference to or no?
Well, it's exactly what we were just saying. You know, you could have a righteous parents who have a wicked son, and vice versa. You could have really wicked people who have a righteous son. The godly soul is implanted by God. He's the third
He gets to pick.
He's the third partner in the intimacy, right?
Gotcha.
Any other thoughts on chapter 2? What did we learn in chapter 2? Can we just give us a quick one-liner? Because I think everything that we just read here can easily be explained in one line.
Well, the makeup of our soul, nefesh, ruach, and neshama, has our soul has 3 parts. Our godly soul.
Our godly soul has 3 parts.
And our animal soul.
That's true. We didn't really learn that in this chapter, but I told you. That's a detail. What's the main thrust?
The godly soul.
The godly soul. Where does it come from?
God.
It's a part of God, literally, right? The godly soul is like the DNA of God. That's what we learned in chapter 2. Okay? And it could be expressed in a very, very holy way, or it could be expressed in a not so holy way. Remember that even the most sinful and evil of children are still children, right? So even the most sinful and evil of Jews, a child is a child is a child, right? A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. And I mean, by Jew there, I mean anybody who's grafted into the olive tree of Israel, right? Anybody who's joined themselves to the one God, they are a child of God, and there's no other way that you... Okay, maybe they're a lowly soul, maybe they're a, earthy kind of person, maybe they're a sinful type of person, we can't judge each other until we walk a mile in each other's moccasins, right? Because if you're a mile away, then how are you going to catch me without shoes, right? Just kidding. The idea is we're all a little bit different. At the same point, we're all the DNA of God, right? And that's what we learned in chapter 2.
Okay.
Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Where are we? Do you think we can branch into chapter 3?
My notes do.
Can we be so risque?
We're going to touch on the Sefirot.
Okay. Well, why don't we you want to just pause the camera and then redo it so that way we can
Have a start point.
we'll have a sharp chapter 2 for our audience. Shalom.